Did you ever see one of these in white or in black? I feel like we should have done a blade or a knife series a long time ago. If we do another knife, what is it gonna be? So we do like a medieval sword or a katana. I feel like we should do a machete, because that's what they typically use to chop. I shouldn't say this, I'm gonna get demonetized. Anyway, look, when you're making a Swiss Army knife, you're gonna have to have a couple of layers, alright? So this thing got the front and the back red covers, and it's got like 3 layers of, like 3 little sheets of metal in between, okay? And these little 3 sheets of metal, they separate the tools that are within here. You got a little cork, you got your bottle opener, and whatever else is going on in there. So let's make this by taking a cube, and I think the cube should be something like 3 or 4 times the length, right? So if we scale it up on the x-axis by like 4, I think that's approximately the right ratio. Now, this thing needs to be subdivided a couple of times actually. The first subdivision is going to be like this, because we want to separate it into even tiles like this. So 3 loop guts, and now we have 4 squares if we look at it from the top, all right? Next, I'm going to subdivide the ends one more time, okay? And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to be able to circle these things, okay, like this. If I take these edges at the ends, like this, and also the edges around them, these edges need to be round, okay? It's not supposed to be a cube. And I can do that by using W, Loop Tools, Relax. If you don't have your Loop Tools enabled, just go Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and type in Loop, and just activate this add-on real quick, and you can use some extra tools. I have a separate video for that. Check out Arijan Loop Tools if you want to learn how to use this. And then we can do this a couple of times, so we can set the number of iterations to like 5. Maybe we should do 5. We'll just do it a couple of times, like once or maybe 3 times, and that's going to be a little bit better. But see, now we have this kind of weird looking end of this object. I don't want to have it this sharp or this tight. So if we subdivide this, let's see what happens. We need to delete 1/2, and I'm going to delete the bottom half, because when I delete the bottom half, now it starts to sort of look like the top cover of the Swiss Army knife. You know what I mean? We're still going to make it a bit thinner and a bit more properly shaped. But another thing which is very important here is that we make one side a little bit smaller than the other side, like this, okay? This has to be a little bit smaller, and everything in between needs to be slid like this. We need to get rid of this stuff, so it's like a little decline if we look at it from one side towards the other side, okay? So this side just gradually gets a bit smaller, and then it gets to this part. It's like 2 separate circles which are connected, and one is a little bit bigger, the other is a little bit smaller. Now, this needs to be a lot thinner, so it's going to be a lot more like this, maybe an extra edge like this. Alright, we can use Alt-S to make this a little bit thicker. I'm going to do another loop cut, and this top surface over here, I'm going to inset it just by a little bit, by like this. Okay, Object Shade Smooth. Now, we need to apply 1 level of subdivision to this for a start, okay? Because if we apply 1 level of subdivision, then we get a lot of new geometry which we can use to shape this. And if you look at the shape, okay, it's got like this little cutout for the cork that goes from this part to over here. So let's make that. And we need to have the extra geometry for this. So here's how we can do that. Let's get rid of some of this extra. I'm going to dissolve some of the edges. I don't need to have all this shit present. I'm going to cut out, it's a little bit less than half. It's approximately like this much is cut out. So we can delete those faces. And then I'll come over here. I'll take this segment. Maybe I'll push it a little bit in like this. And I'll put the 3D cursor on this corner, and I'm going to rotate this selection around this little point. So I'm going to rotate it, because this is what the real life shape looks like. It kind of goes inwards as if it's cut at an angle. And then we have to probably scale it up a little bit. And I'm going to use a G-stretch tool to turn this into a straight line. And maybe I'll use this vertex to make it exact, okay? So this tool, Loop Tools, G-stretch, spread evenly, set that to project. Now we have a straight line here. And maybe we can use a knife tool to also make, yeah, this part is supposed to be like kind of like a circular cutoff at the other end, right? So maybe we can do something to make that a little bit more clean, okay? So if we bring this edge close to this one, we can bring this one here and this one here, and if we subdivide this again, it might just give us, if we do everything right, it might just give us like a round little corner here, like this, and that's going to be the shape that we want to have there. So we'll use a knife tool to cut this part off to make it into a straight line, and I'll get rid of everything on this side, like this. Alright, I'll get rid of all this, and now we have this almost circular little cut. Maybe we can adjust the shape a little bit better, kind of like this. There we go. That looks a bit like a rounder cut off, and that's going to be good. Now, we have some more geometry that I want to get rid of, namely this, because that's going to allow us to take whatever we have above here. Alright, we'll extrude that, we'll push it down, and then we'll just fill in the little gaps that we have here. And now the geometry is good for this. We just have to do a couple more things so that we have an extra edge around here, which is going to limit the bevel. Once we subdivide this, it's going to get a little bit more under control. Right now we just have this shitty shading issues. And now to do this, there's a couple of ways that I can think of. One way is to simply add a bevel, which is going to go both ways like this, and I think that's probably the best way. If we take this, we bevel it, and we add like 2 segments, so each edge turns into 3 edges like this, and we set the shape to 1. And if we set the shape to 1, it's basically the same as adding a loop cut here, adding a loop cut here. It just gets the whole subdivision thing a little bit more under control. All right, and the same thing is happening on both sides. You're just probably gonna have to slide some shit around a little bit to make sure that you don't have any weird disruptions in your shape or anything like that, because sometimes doing this when you're beveling stuff, sometimes shit tends to clip through other things and shit gets a little bit messy from time to time. But now we have the rough shape for this thing going for us. I want to take, maybe I'll add another loop cut like this so that I can bring it very close to this part. If I add another loop cut here, it's going to be a problem because it's going to mess up the shape by making it a little bit pointier at one of these angles here. It's not really that visible here, but it is bad practice to do that. So I'll take this edge, I'll slide it in a little bit, and now we have a nice sharp corner here and a nice round corner here, and we're more or less good to go. Another thing that I need to do here is notice how the back side of the knife, it doesn't want to focus because now it's focusing on me, but there's like this little white chip, and you can pull this out. Mine is a little bit stuck, so I don't want to fuck up my nail if I try to pull it out. But if you pull this out, it's a fucking toothpick, okay? And there's also one on the other side, which is gray, and that's like a little pair of tweezers which you can use to pull out a splinter or something. If you fuck yourself up, or if you get struck by, if somebody shoots you with say you get stung by a bee and then a stinger stays inside your skin, you can pull it out with that little thing. So to make these little things, we have to delete some geometry from the sides here. Now, even though it's not exactly in the middle, I'm going to pretend like it's more or less in the middle, just because it makes it that much easier to work with. So I need to take some of this geometry, I need to inset it, I'm going to check my edge rail, and I'm going to uncheck my boundary, because I need to delete this stuff down here, so I don't want to have an extra edge over here. If I delete the boundary, if there's no face behind this corner, there's not going to be anything inset on this side. And now that we did that, we just have to correct some of this to make it a little bit more straight. Okay, I will slide this one forward a little bit. So these should definitely be in a straight line, like this. And this should be more like a knife cut that goes straight out. So I can use a knife tool like this, XC, to cut a straight line that goes through the object on the X-axis like this. And I'm gonna get rid of this by just sliding it to the side. I'll do the same thing on the other side here. So now we're gonna have a nice square cut into which we can fit these little extra devices that we have here. All right, and now let's see if we have to also slide this forwards a little bit to make this hole a bit smaller. Maybe I'll slide some of these forwards a little bit. Now that we have that, I'm gonna inset this one more time because that's gonna help me control this shape when I because of the subdivision, right? And I can delete this. I'll come down here, extrude this and just pull it straight down. All right, maybe even better than insetting this would have been simply to just bevel it like we did before. Okay, so we come over here like this, we select all of these and we bevel them with the same shape of the bevel, which is set to a value of 1. Okay, and now look at how beautiful this shape looks. It looks exactly like we want it to look. And we can now take a little piece here. We can take this shape, we can duplicate this, we can make it a little bit smaller. I'm going to separate it to a new object, and we're going to bridge these edge loops. And the reason we're bridging these edge loops is because that's going to allow us to create the shape that we're supposed to fit into this, if you can imagine it like a puzzle, right? So we have this little 3D shape now, which we're going to fit in there so it fits like a puzzle, and it's going to make our object more complete. So I need to take all of this stuff from the sides, I need to extrude this, bring it down, fill this stuff in like so, bridge some edge loops this way, and maybe bridge some edge loops over on this side. Although we need to have a cut then going to the lower side so we can connect everything, and the geometry is going to connect perfectly. And now I also want to bevel these a little bit just so the edges get a little bit sharper on the sides here. I'm also going to bevel the undersides, but I'm not going to bevel these two sides because these two sides I want them to stay curved like the shape here, because I can't control this shape much on the knife, right? So we bevel this a little bit. Object, shade smooth. Obviously, if we add more levels of subdivision, this is going to look nicer and smoother, and it's going to connect a little bit better. But we're going to keep it simple for now, just to make sure that we don't get any lag or anything, because I'm just using a shitty office laptop, which is supposed to be for uni, because I'm traveling. I don't have my computer with me. I'm going to get it soon, so I don't want to get too much lag. Sometimes when I'm recording, it just starts lagging like fucking crazy, and I don't know why. I guess it's just because the computer is not meant for Blender. So now, let's see where we stopped. We have to have another little segment, and maybe we can push this forwards a little bit. We have to have another little segment. Now we get to the part where we get the first sheet of metal. And to do that, we'll duplicate this thing, we'll separate it, and we need to close all these little detail shit that we created here. We don't want to have any of this on this part, okay? So we'll delete these vertices, we'll fill this in with new geometry. We're gonna get that shit under control a little bit. Okay, this needs to stick out maybe a little bit further, like so. And this part, also we're gonna get rid of these vertices, and we're gonna take everything from over here to over here. We're gonna delete that. We're gonna delete these vertices, and now we have to fill this in the same way that the other side is filled, which might be a little bit tricky because probably they're not perfectly symmetrical. But if we just duplicate something, we kind of connect it like this, I think we're gonna be fine, all right? So now we can just fill this, extrude it. We can inset both the top and the bottom faces. I got hiccups because I'm drinking a liter of milk right now. It's just before I go to sleep, I drink a liter of milk. That's my routine. I drink a liter of milk, and then I have to go to the bathroom at least 2 or 3 times before I go to bed, because otherwise I'm gonna wake up in the middle of the night to piss that thing out, okay? So I'm just recording a video. I had a long day, I'm pretty sleepy. You guys can probably tell that my energy is probably like 50% of what it is sometimes. But we can bevel this little loop cut over here to add another little edge. Object, shade smooth. This is supposed to be a pretty sharp object. Notice how it doesn't have the right shape, it doesn't fit here. So we have to move this out a little bit. We're gonna modify the shape until it fits perfectly with the knife, because this is supposed to be like a smooth fit. It's supposed to join nicely. It's not supposed to have like messed up imperfections and all this shitty imperfections in how these different pieces are put together. It's supposed to be nice and smooth, all right? It's a Swiss knife. These people do stuff professionally. Why do they call Swiss watches the best watches? I think maybe like Germans make the best watches. I don't know the difference. What's the difference between a Swiss watch? What do the Swiss do to their watches that other people don't do? It's the 21st century. They all have the same technology, don't they? Anyway, let's see what we need to do next. See, this little sheet of metal is really thin, so I think we got the thickness approximately right here. Maybe we'll make it just a little bit thicker by pulling it down a bit like that. Now we need to duplicate this little sheet 3 times, it seems, or 2 times we need to duplicate it. And I also just realized that this sheet at the top here, it's also cut out the same way that this object is. So we're gonna have to take care of that in a minute. Let's duplicate this once and move it down by minus 0.5 or minus 0.3, and then again by minus 0.3, something like this. And maybe we have to bring them a little bit closer together because they look like they're pretty far apart. And we can bring them closer together because they're separate objects. We put the 3D cursor on the top one, we select the second two, we change the option transforms here to affect only locations, and if we scale it down on the z-axis, it's not going to make them any thinner. It's just going to bring their origins closer together. It's like it's scaling their origins, but the object is not getting affected by the scaling. Alright? It's only moving. Now we can scale this to like 0.8 or another 0.9 on the z-axis. And now let's see how we're going to cut this little sucker up, because on the other side we're not supposed to have this cut at the top. Alright, so if you put the 3D cursor here, we duplicate this, we mirror it to the other side, this thing is going to stay, so this is fine. This hole here is fine, but this is not supposed to be here. So we have to essentially just delete one half. Alright, mark seam, delete this side, or delete the faces on that side, and we copy this, we duplicate it, we scale it to -1. Alright, let's see if everything can merge together. We have to scale this down. And now we should be able to close this gap here. I think it looks good, so I think we're fine. I think we managed to solve the problem. Dissolve these extra edges. Remove the extra seams, clear seams. We don't need any of that. Something's going on over here, but we're going to take care of that by just taking some of this geometry, taking some of these vertices, and just pushing them to the side a little bit, like this, right? And that's looking pretty good. I think we're gonna have to do some correction here because this part was not exactly symmetrical. So we should have, when we mirrored this, that's why we also didn't fit with the hole perfectly, because this thing is not exactly in the middle. So we can't just scale this across the origin, right? We have to scale it across a different point, and that different point is going to be probably something like this vertex here, because that's exactly in the middle, or the world origin even. So now when we take this, duplicate sy -1, now it's mirrored perfectly, it fits perfectly here, and both sides seem to be symmetrical, except it still doesn't fit properly on this side. So we're gonna have to take care of that by just taking some of these and just moving them inwards a little bit. See if we can correct this a little bit better as well. So now I think we're gonna have to take the whole entire edge. Can somebody explain to me how the fuck this happened? This was a completely flat surface, and for some reason now it's crooked. So we're gonna have to make these things from scratch, because this thing is not flat, that's why. Alright, so we have to scale this to 0 on the z-axis, this to 0 on the z-axis, and now I'll take this one, I'll duplicate it, separate it to a new object, get me close over here. So now, if I delete these edges, I have to fill this in. I don't want to delete this vertex because I'll be able to connect this stuff a little bit better. I'll delete these extra vertices. I'll pull these out, and I'm going to use this to shape out whatever's happening over here. Okay, so I'll bring it all the way up to the top. I'll bring it to the top, and now I can subdivide this, or I can add like 3 loop cuts, which if I make them a little bit bigger, if I make them a little bit further apart, I can bevel them, and these are going to be the little plates. So you can invert the selection, and we can scale this up to separate them a little bit further, and that's going to give us these 3 sheets of metal. That's going to be lovely. It's going to be nice and professional. So this face, we're going to fill this, we're going to fill this, but we again need to inset these faces like this, and then once we inset them, we have to do a grid fill to keep the geometry proper. Right, grid fill here, grid fill there, and also a loop cut right over this way. Okay, and now we also need to take care of this face, because this is completely unacceptable. See, this is supposed to be Let's see, we can mirror this one across to this side. If we take these two faces and we place the 3D cursor between them, we can delete the top layer. We can take this one, duplicate it, and scale it to -1 all over the z-axis. But we can't do the same thing at the top, because at the top we have this little cut-out part for where you put the cork opener. All right, and the cork opener, we can fit that thing in there by just removing a segment from here, and then we can use some of this geometry here to extrude whatever is supposed to be going on here. Or better yet, if we want to make this perfectly accurate, we're gonna take the vertices that make up this shape on the inside, like this. We're gonna separate them, and we're gonna join this with this thing down here, all right? And now we can just bring this closer, and we can bring these vertices. If we put the 3D cursor here, we'll just bring it there on the x and the y axis. We'll scale them to 0 with the 3D cursor, so they align perfectly. And now if we put the 3D cursor over here, also there's some aligning work to do here. But if we put the 3D cursor at the bottom, now we can just extrude this entire little loop that goes from the back to the front. We can extrude that, scale it to 0 here, remove the doubles or merge the vertices by distance, and that's gonna give us a nice clean shape for this object. All right, and it looks like we're gonna need another little loop cut here. But if we fill these faces, it's gonna be the same story again. We have to inset them, and I'm not gonna even bother filling up this grid fill or anything. I'm just gonna inset them a little bit so it looks like there's a bit of an extra edge there. But obviously these faces on the inside, they have to be deleted. There's no other way. So just as long as it looks like there's a little bevel, like a little smooth edge there, that's gonna be totally fucking fine. Okay, let's see what happened here. We had a face shoot out into infinity in that direction over there. It went so far that we can't even select it. Okay, so let's find out what the hell happened. It looks like there's a face here which cannot even be selected. So Blender completely just bugged out on us. So what if we delete these faces? If we just delete those faces, it looks like the problem just disappears magically. So we can fill these faces manually and we're gonna be good to go. Like this. And what about this? Yeah, we need to have a vertex there, so this is gonna be fine. If we loop cut this, we'll bring these edges to that loop cut, and now we can just bridge the edge loops on this, and we're good to go. Okay, also loop cut this way. So now we have the first few layers of our Swiss knife. Let's see what we have to do next. I feel like I'm about to fall asleep on camera here, so it's almost like I'm talking, but on autopilot. So I'm like halfway aware of what I'm saying, you know? And I'm trying to keep it together because I'm not supposed. When you're tired, when you don't feel like doing something, you're not supposed to show it because that makes you a pussy. All right, you need to get your shit done, and you need to do it without complaining. I need to get this fucking video done, and I have to do it without complaining. I can't be over here bitching about how I'm tired. I don't want to do this, and I just cut it out. I'll just cut it and continue tomorrow. No, fuck that bullshit. We said we're gonna do it. We gotta do it, and we're gonna do it. Okay. And we just have a couple more things to take care of before we can finish the episode, because once we finish the model, then I can cut the episode, and then I can get to the texturing part tomorrow. Okay. So here's the things that we have to finish. Let's take care of the hardest part first, which is going to be this little thing that we have to attach there. And this is just going to be like a simple screw modifier. So I'll take a little circle, maybe with 6 vertices. Put that to the side here, and it has this origin here in the middle, but we're going to move it away from the origin, and we're going to rotate it around the axes so that it's aligned with the origin. It's pointing towards the origin, you could say. And we're going to use a screw modifier, because the screw modifier is going to let us lift it up by increasing the screw value, and this is going to have to be a lot thicker, so we have to increase the size of the circle, and it's going to be something like maybe a slightly higher screw value, because I'm looking at it over here. It looks like the gap between if we look at this cross section versus this cross section, the gap between those two is just a little bit bigger than the size of the circle. So something like 1.2 I think is going to be fine. All right, and then we need to have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. If we look at the very tip, it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's going to be something like this, I believe. All right, so this is going to be the tip, or this is going to be the very tip. I'm going to consider that as 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it's going to be like this. Okay, this is how it's supposed to look. I can apply this, and then I'll scale this one down to, let's just scale it to 0. This one's going to be a little bit bigger, and it's going to gradually turn into its full size. All right, and then we get up here, and up here this turns into a different shape. And the way it does that is we can come over here to side view, we can click extrude, and just kind of bring it up. Right, if we control and left click somewhere, it's going to extrude and bring it into that angle. All right, it's going to follow your mouse around if you click somewhere, and then we can just use that to connect it to this little metal plate, which basically holds this whole thing in place. All right, so now if we push this a little bit further back, and by the way, we can bevel this a bit to make it a bit nicer, slide it back and forth to make things a little bit more balanced. And now if we lift this up like so, now this extrudes to a little surface, which is kind of like this. All right, I think I want to make this one completely flat. So now I can extrude this out, scale it to 0 on the y-axis, or maybe I'll try to make it so that it's at least the same shape as whatever's going on the other side, like this. Maybe give me an extra loop cut there. And now we can just extrude this up. We have this little face, and we can give this a little subdivision just because I'm doing product design, I'm doing product rendering, so I want this shit to look realistic. I don't want this to look all low poly and clunky. People are talking so much shit. You know, these people on my Instagram, on my YouTube shorts, they're talking so much shit. It's like somebody leaves a comment, oh, there's a 15 IQ, this is such a dumbass trick, you're such an idiot. And then you look at the guy's profile, and he's a fucking nobody. He's some soy boy that looks like a punk. Looks like the kind of person that gets cheated on by every single girl that he ever deals with. He looks like a complete fucking punk. And you know what else he looks like? He looks like the kind of dude that if I walked into a room, this guy would just look at his feet and he wouldn't say anything. Maybe his name, maybe hello, with a soft voice. But he's tough on Instagram. This is the type of shit that you get on social media. Like, people are talking shit to other people, and they don't face any repercussions. Like, what am I gonna tell him? Now you're a fucking asshole. You can't talk like this to me. He doesn't give a fuck. That would make him comment even more, right? But if it was in real life, he wouldn't talk like this. So he's just tough tough through the internet. I'm giving a hypothetical example. I'm making like a persona, which kind of represents a lot of these people, the way they act on social media. So don't be a fucking idiot. If you're not willing to say something to somebody's face, then don't say that shit on the internet either. All right? Don't send direct shitty messages to people. You never know when someone's gonna turn up and shoot you in the fucking head. Anyway, this little piece is supposed to be about as wide as the bottle opener. So something like this, and then we can just connect this, and this is gonna be one of the layers of the knife. So we need to place this somewhere around here, which means the origin should be over here. All right, origin should be up there, so that when we snap this, it's gonna snap there properly. I'm trying so hard not to give you guys a hiccup because I drank all this milk, and I really want to have a lot of hiccups. But I'm trying to keep it professional, at least somewhat, since I'm already fucking shirtless and talking about chopping people up and about behaving yourself on social media. So it's supposed to be something like this. But I think I'm gonna make it, yeah, it's supposed to be a lot thinner, but it's also supposed to be longer. Alright, so if I scale it down towards the 3D cursor a little bit, let's see it from side view. I think it's gonna be something like this. A little bit smaller. Yeah, this part should then definitely be a little bit lower if we're gonna try to do this. So we're gonna have to lower this down so that there's more space for this stuff, so it doesn't collide, you know what I mean? And now we can lift this up, push it outwards a little bit, like this, Maybe not that much, because yeah, we still have to make it a little bit thinner, because otherwise there's just not enough space to fit this. Although if you look at the side profile of this, it kind of goes above the surface here, so I think we're gonna be fine without worrying too much about the scale. Like it can stick out here a little bit. That's what's happening in real life at least. I don't know if this was intentional or if this is like a technical error. But now we just have to scale this thing up a little and bring it all the way to the end. Okay, kind of like this. Although that's gonna sort of stretch out my little circles there, but it doesn't matter too much. A little bit more and we're good to go. Okay, there we go. I think this looks pretty good. And we can also, just out of common courtesy, we can also fill this stuff in the back, maybe add a loop cut to get this shit under control a little bit better. And this gives us the first piece, the first little tool, all right? Now we just got some really simple stuff. Like for example, we have a cube going through the middle. So if we select this whole thing, we place the 3D cursor there, we have like a little cube that kind of acts as a core piece of this object. All right, something like this. And this, yeah, we didn't fill this, so this is not really supposed to be visible. But the part that I'm talking about, it's sort of like if we delete the top and the bottom faces of this, and we give this some subdivision, we can bevel these loop cuts like this. And now we have a smooth little end here, but everything else is pretty straight and pretty rough. Right, object shade smooth. That's just sitting there in the middle of the knife. I'm looking at it right now. It's kind of like this. You see that little gap in the front? Maybe it should be a little bit bigger. But we just have to make sure it doesn't stick through the side too much, because we don't want it to be visible and interfere with this object. So it's something like this, right? And now we just have to fill in a couple of the little spaces with just some basic tools. Like on the back side, we got a big blade, and also we have a gap here. So this part, how about we just use some proportional editing to push this stuff inwards, right? If we take some geometry from here, object, or press O to use proportional editing, and we're gonna take like this entire segment, maybe we can push it inwards a little bit, but maybe that's not such a great idea, because instead we should just delete some of this geometry. Maybe we can even select the faces, and then when we delete this geometry, now all of a sudden we get plenty of space to work with over here. And now we fucked up because we also deleted the lower face. So this is supposed to be separated to new object. And now we can go ahead and delete this little segment like this, faces. I'm gonna slide this out and slide this inwards a little bit. I'll also slide these inwards. And now we have like a nice little cut here through which we can fit some more stuff, okay? And now we also have to take these extra edges from the sides, because these extra edges are gonna help us control our geometry, right? They're gonna help us control our subdivision. So we have to make sure that this stuff is gonna be aligned right from the top and the bottom. We can just move these manually, it's gonna be fine. This one's gonna come here. We just take the vertices from underneath and we place them so they're directly under the vertices of the top surface, right? Or something like that anyway. I don't know which one we're moving, we're just moving some of them, right? And as long as we get to the point where they're reasonably aligned, reasonably well aligned, now we can start taking this outer little edge here and we can use that and to extrude a little extra edge all the way from the front to the back, okay? So every single set of vertices is gonna have an extra little layer outside, which we're then just going to be able to bridge with the edge loops of the other side like this, okay? So loop tools, let's focus on what's happening here. Loop tools, bridge, we have something else selected. A W bridge edge loops, and we're going to do the same thing here, and we deselect the faces at the front and the back, bridge edge loops, also on the underneath side, right? So we're going to deselect this little guy, loop tools, or W bridge edge loops, and now we have a little extra space there. Okay, so now we just have to make the little blade, which is going to be something like a little square here, a little tiny cube over here, a tiny cube from which we can extrude, if we look at it from the back side, from which we can extrude a little blade. So this is the part that fixes it, like this is almost like the hinge or the pivot for the blade when you want to, you know, expand it and pull the blade out. So it has to fit in here pretty well. And then if we give this some length, now we just have to make like a little extra edge here, which is going to go downwards, and then we extrude it again, and this is the blade itself, right? Which is going to come all the way to almost the other side of the knife, and this has to come all the way down, and this is supposed to be an extra edge like this. So when we subdivide this is like a little step that suddenly goes down to make this a lot thinner. All right, when we subdivide it 2 times, and this should also be a bit wider, so we can push this inwards on the y-axis, and maybe a bevel, an edge loop with a bevel on the inside wouldn't hurt, right? Also a little edge loop like this, or a little loop cut like this, right? Object shade smooth. This is the first blade, and the reason it goes down is because it's supposed to create space for another object over here. All right, and I'm looking at it right now, and the second object is basically the same thing. Okay, it's just a little cube here, which I think it starts before the end of the knife, but something like this. I'll put it like this. And now again, you just have to extrude it one more time, and lift it up so it fits like a puzzle with the main blade. All right, so we can just pull this out a little bit, give it some width. I fucked up because I left my window open, and I won't tell you guys where just yet, but I live in one of the biggest party towns of Europe. Okay, I'm right in the heart of this city, so every single evening like this, there's like pub crawls walking around, there's people singing, there's drunk people yelling and shit. It's an incredibly entertaining place to live. All right, I wonder which one of you guys can guess which city I'm living in. Some of you guys already know. If you know because I told you, then don't say it. But I wonder if that description rings a bell for anybody. Okay, it's in the center of Europe. And now, let's see what's gonna happen. If we pull this out, give it some more subdivision, give a little loop cut this way, loop cut this way, loop cut this way, get the shape under control, right? Object shade smooth. I think I just want to make this a little bit more. It doesn't even have to fit well with the shape of the object, so we don't have to care about that. It kind of comes out like this, and then it rotates back inwards. Maybe this is supposed to go a little bit further out like this. Something like this. It kind of sticks out a little bit. This is the part where I think it's a can opener or something. And maybe this part's gonna come out a little bit more. There we go. All right. And now we have something almost copy-paste right below this. But I do want to make this a little bit more round. So I'll take these, and I'll pull them apart, and I'll slide this one back and forth a couple of times. Also, these two, I will move them away. I'll move them inwards like this, just so this part is a bit more round and a little bit more controlled. You know what I mean? So it kind of smoothly enters the body of this object. And now we can mirror this across the z-axis here. And we have another little tool happening down here. Okay. This other little tool, I think it has almost the exact same shape, except maybe it's a little bit shorter. Okay. I'm not gonna expand this thing to try and figure out what this stuff is. I just wanted to kind of look cool, to kind of look like whatever the real life object is. There's somebody driving by in a car and you're blasting music, and I have to make sure that you guys don't hear. I have to make sure the camera or the microphone doesn't pick up the music, because I'm gonna get a copyright bust, even if it's just in the background of the streets. I'm gonna get fucked. I should have closed my window, but now it's too late, because I'm definitely not gonna cut this video. So now I want to make this a little bit longer, and I'll take this little object I'll scale it to -1 on the x-axis, and also maybe -1 on the z-axis, so that when I bring it to the other side here, it almost fits with this object like this, right? Except I also have to bring this one inwards a little bit more. It's gonna be something like this. And maybe we should also bring these two and make them a little bit thinner, right? So if I take this, if I take all of this and I deselect the top layer, I think there's like control select. Yeah, if you control and then use like a block select, you can deselect stuff. So I'll just lift this up a little bit, but maybe this part is gonna go down. And now these two parts, they fit well together. Okay, I don't know how this stuff is supposed to attach. It doesn't seem physically possible to me, whatever's happening here. Maybe this part is supposed to go a little bit further inwards. Okay, if we select this little loop here, and then control plus, if we deselect this, the rest of it we can just move inwards a little bit like this on the x-axis. There we go. So now we have some extra space. We have some extra space here for this to connect. Anything else that we have to make here? This side is looking pretty good. The other side is definitely still missing some tools, okay? There's like another blade underneath this thing, which is just gonna be another cube. So we can add a cube there, which has to be the right thickness like this. And we can extrude this cube out to make this very simple shape, all right? Extrude it out, and towards the end, it just starts to get a little bit thinner. And it's almost just as long as the cork opener, all right? So something like this, and this should be a lot wider like this, and we can push this thing inwards. And once we do that, once we subdivide it, just a couple more loop cuts to get this shit under control, all right? And now let's see what happens, smooth shading and all this. Let's see how the whole thing is looking. Maybe this should be a little bit further inwards, all right? Like this, and now it's gonna fit together a little bit better. And if we look at it from a distance, let's try a little matte cap just to see what it's gonna look like in different circumstances. Maybe like a little red shiny matte cap. I think it's looking pretty good, all right? Now I'm still gonna have to do a little bit of correction, a little bit of alignment to make this stuff fit a little bit better, to make it more technically correct, to make it more smooth and precise, and make sure that everything is fitting correctly. But the Swiss knife, more or less every feature has been added to the Swiss knife, all right? I think there's a couple more things like this little dangling thing, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't want to do this shit right now. So we did enough. Maybe I'll decide to add this thing later. Maybe I'll just say fuck it, I don't feel like it. This is gonna be my version of the Swiss knife. We made almost everything, and the next episode is gonna be dedicated to texturing, all right? So we're gonna add some materials to this. We're gonna do some texture painting to make this little logo and shit. We're gonna have to render it. We're gonna turn it into an artwork. So let me know what you guys want to see in the next one. If there's something specific we're gonna talk about, let me know what you think. Subscribe to the channel. If you want to see more full in-depth tutorials, I'm doing a Tiger Tank course right now. We're doing a supercar modeling course on my Patreon, all right? So check that out. Let me know what you think. Stay in touch, guys. Join the Discord, and I'll see you in the next one.